Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Metacast by Naavik, a podcast in which we explore the business and future of video games. I'm Aaron Bush, and in this episode, I'm thrilled to host a conversation with Caro Krenzer, the co-founder and CEO of Trailmix, a mobile game studio behind the hit Merge 2 game, Love and Pies, which just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. Caro, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before we dive fully into Trailmix and Love and Pies and everything fun and exciting there, let's go ahead and start by setting some context for people who may not know your story. So Caro, what got you into the games industry and what were you up to before Trailmix?
Sure. I arrived in the games industry in quite an accidental way, I suppose. My background is in finance. I went to business school. I worked for banks and all kinds of other companies and worked for Accenture as a management consultant before I met someone serendipitously who worked in London for Playfish and told me about her amazing job as a product manager. And I actually couldn't believe it, how much fun she had at work and how passionate she was about what she was doing. And I don't think I would have ever guessed that there could be a career for me in the games industry. It was just not really a thing. And to be honest, like growing up, games were definitely in our household more a thing for the boys and not for myself. So yeah, I quite stumbled into the gaming industry in a way. And so Playfish took a risk on me, really. They hired me as a product manager on one of their games in 2010. And I moved to London and never looked back.
Awesome. Yeah, I stumbled into the games industry too without expecting. So glad there are more people like us. Well, great. I know, you spent some time at EA and King, but I'm curious, what were the personal motivators that made you want to start your own business after spending some time at these other companies?
Sure. Both Playfish, which then got acquired by EA, and King were incredible learning experiences for me. And I've been so incredibly lucky to have ended up in these places that were obviously highly successful and gave me the space to grow in my role. I think really what drove us to leave King, me and my co-founder Tristan, was because we wanted to create a place where people can truly be the best version of themselves. Because I think over the years we've often seen that, like the right people in the wrong place just can't be the best version of themselves, really. And so it's always been incredibly important to us that we create a team that is diverse, that truly reflects our audience, but that also truly respects our audience, which honestly, in casual games, at least in the past, has not always been the case. So it was incredibly important for us that we create an environment where those things are true. And also we, especially at King, when we were still there, Candy Crush had already 300 million monthly active users, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And yeah. I think we saw how many people you can actually reach with really good mobile games. And we always asked ourselves the question, what else can we give those players beyond sort of like the bite-sized entertainment? And if you reach so many people, like what is it that you can do to really have a positive impact? And those were really the two drivers that led us to found Trailmix.
Awesome. And we'll talk much more about culture and how your thinking about inclusivity extends to Love and Pies. But to just still get a bit more background, could you tell me a bit more about Trailmix? You mentioned, building a workplace where people can be themselves and respecting the player, but what really is Trailmix's mission and what's the state of the company these days?
Sure. So the purpose of Trailmix is really to create safe and nourishing spaces for millions of people. That does include the team, that does include the audience, and it's really quite like purpose and mission driven to have a positive impact on our employees, on on the gaming industry and ideally on the whole world. And right now, so we founded Trailmix in December 2017. And now we're 47 people. We're based in London. We are in the office 3 days a week. And we have a lovely office in King's Cross, which is very central. And it's been fantastic to be together again, actually.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and zoom back in time a little bit. When you did start Trailmix in 2017, what was the thesis of your first Envision game? I'd love to hear a bit more about how you got off the ground and what those early days of development were like.
Sure. In terms of the game, I suppose for us, we always envisioned Trailmix games to be snackable yet nourishing. That's actually why we called the company Trailmix. And so what does snackable yet nourishing mean? I mean, first of all, snackable, as I said, we worked for King for 5 years before that. Really, the first 9 people who joined Trailmix worked at King. We all made mobile puzzle games and specifically match 3 games there. And I think the snackability of a really good match 3 game is just so incredibly delightful. But we also had just worked for 5 years on match 3 games. So I think we were a little bit burned out by working on match 3 games. So we really wanted to figure out what is next. What is the next match 3 game? And we wanted to make sure that it's us who finds the next mechanic that can be so fun and reach so many people. And then secondly, the nourishing for us is really about creating worlds that are safe for people, that are fun for people, that give people more than maybe what they get in other mobile games. And in particularly the like story-driven games and using a story and really strong narrative and creating characters that represent our audience was always very important to us.
Right. And I guess as a follow-up, and the early iterations of Love and Pies, when you were hunting for that new mechanic, you're trying to innovate on a core mechanic. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was like you were merging like the tile blast mechanic with auto merging, but it never really quite clicked in those early phases. What did you learn from those like early iterations?
Sure. Well, the core idea, or the idea for the original core gameplay, really came from my co-founder Tristan, who's also the designer, and I at the time was really into merge games, but I always had an incredible love for Candy Crush, and he at some point said that like, what happens if you just combine like a core mechanic like Merge Dragons and Candy Crush? And I was like, this is the best idea ever. And so we got really carried away by this and really tried to make this happen. And I think my biggest learnings from working on this core mechanic for a very long time and it then not working out as well as we thought it would are that it's really easy to get carried away by a great idea that you're very passionate about and that you also get like very positive early feedback on. Definitely our friends and family were very excited about it. Industry fans were very excited about it. I think for a long time, no one really had tried to innovate and sort of like in the puzzle mechanic sort of area. And so we got just so much good feedback. And so we were convinced that this is going to work. And I think that also meant to some extent that we did quantitative testing much later than we should have. And when we did the quantitative testing, the first iteration was absolutely bad. And over the years, we got it to a state where it was pretty good. But even then, good is the enemy of great, right? And so yeah, it's in an area where it's just so tough to make the decision that it's just not going to work out.
Right. And just to clarify, by the quantitative testing, you just mean key metrics like retention, like engagement, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, correct. And within that, actually, what we focused on too much, I think, is the short-term retention. We were very keen to get day one retention above 50%. And I think we were so focused on that we neglected collecting more data points early on, because in the end we got day 1 to above 50%, and day 3 also looked pretty good. But from there on, it just kept declining, and generally the retention curve just looked quite unhealthy in terms of the churn. And we only saw that relatively late because we actually didn't prioritize day 30 retention. So I think that's another big lesson, that in the end, day 1 retention really doesn't matter. It's so important to understand what the retention curve looks like.
Yeah, no, that's a really good lesson. And just to click into that a little bit, because I'm curious, but like, what about that mechanic didn't lend itself to longer term retention? What was like the core learning there?
For puzzle games, especially failed state puzzle games like Candy Crush or Clickers, that where you can purchase 5 extra moves, for example, it is so important to get the right balance between skill and luck, because only then it makes sense, like you give players the right challenge. They feel that, like they're really good at the game. It also motivates them, in the end to make this 5 moves sort of like purchase. And our mechanic was definitely just a bit too high on the luck spectrum because of the chain effects that we basically created. Without chain effects, it was a bit too static. With chain effects, it was just too much luck involved. So we just never got the balance right.
Gotcha. That makes sense. As we were saying before we started recording, Naavik, we recently wrote a big game deconstruction on Love and Pies in Naavik Pro. And Caro, I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, I'll send you the doc afterwards. You might be interested. But, after playing and learning more about the game, my favorite part of the Love and Pies story is the massive pivot that your team underwent. Many people who play the game now might not know that Love and Pies, spent 3 years as that level-based puzzle game that you were describing, and only more recently, right, like a year ago, became what is now the launched, highly successful Merge 2 style game. I'd love for you to unpack the story of that pivot. At what point did you know that change was needed, and how did you actually go about making this massive change be so successful?
Sure. Well, Love and Pies really is basically 5 different games at this point, because we obviously have the core, the meta, the story, and we actually sort of like mixed and matched all of these elements quite a few times over the years to really understand what works for our audience and what resonates the most and drives good KPIs. We did actually test various cores that had variations of sort of the merge with gravity, as we call it. And we were quite married to that idea because of the failed state gameplay. From a monetization perspective, that has been our bread and butter, had been our bread and butter for many, many years. And we felt that, this works, we should focus on this. So we did shy away from a little bit from the persistent board mechanic, if that makes sense. But as mentioned before, I think the biggest mistake was really that we spent too much time focusing on retention, trying to, over the years, with all of the different sort of variation and mixing and matching and trying to figure out, we did neglect what sort of like the long-term retention impact of a merge with gravity mechanic would be. And we found it out relatively late. And really, I think what helped us to make the decision in the end to pivot was that when we saw the long-term retention numbers and also the sort of like the longer-term monetization numbers, we realized that we're not there yet. But we wanted to give it one more try. The team was obviously incredibly passionate about the game. So we released a massive update that had lots of different live ops features, because like we were wondering if that maybe what could impact lower than expected long-term retention is that it was pretty bare bone nowadays. Players do expect a lot of live ops features and events. So we released this amazing update, and it had absolutely no impact whatsoever. And I think at that point, that was obviously incredibly frustrating, but also it really helped us to make the decision that this is just not going to work.
Yeah, I'd love to just dig into your head a bit on how you were feeling as a leader going through all of this. Was it a situation where, you had sleepless nights, stressed about, the fate of the company being on the line if you don't figure it out? Were you, calm, confident that you always knew, from your experience in the team's background that it would always be figured out? Like, what was going through your mind at this time?
That's a good question. And I would say that obviously by founding and leading a startup, it's all about managing change and uncertainty and difficult situations. It feels like everything is just constantly changing, and there are so many things that need to be figured out. I also think that as a founder, you have to be an incredible optimist, sometimes to a fault. And you have to be a bit crazy if we're being absolutely honest about it.
Right.
But I think, when we started soft launching the game with the old core, which we believed would definitely work, that was in February 2020, and in March 2020, we in London at least went into lockdown. And so basically, the moment we went into lockdown, we saw that our retention numbers are really, really bad, and the game as it was just wouldn't work. So not only didn't we have a game that we could, that looked promising, we also basically had a killer virus out there that was affecting us. So just so many, and we had to move from being only used to working together in an office environment to everyone suddenly has to work from home. So it really wasn't an easy time, and definitely the harder days were probably more frequent than the easy days. However, really the team has just been so amazing, like through it all, and I guess the foundation we had from the beginning in terms of the people who joined us, what our mission was from day one, and sort of like how we trusted each other and believed that together we can do something amazing, I think really definitely pushed me through. And I don't think I ever questioned that we together can make something work.
Yeah, no, that's all super interesting. And hearing you say that makes me think that, obviously, it's a tough spot when you have a game that's not working. The world is falling apart at the same time. As a leader, it's one thing to center yourself, but then also rallying an entire team to continue on that mission. That's hard, but it seems like it wasn't as hard in your case because of work that was put in prior on hiring, on culture, on making sure that people are aligned and excited about whatever it is that you were building. I'd love for you to comment on that a little bit. What were the seeds that you set at the beginning that made change for your team easier than it would have been otherwise?
I guess it shows again that teams are the focus on teams is really the most important thing, and really building a team that wants to work together and that's in it for the long term is so incredibly important. But I guess it's also setting and living the culture of the company, and defining what's important to you as people. And I think that for us as a company, it's always been incredibly important that we create an environment, that allows us, again, to be the best version of ourselves, and that, that's a very respectful and kind environment. And I think it's actually also important to add to this that we've also been incredibly selective when it came to our investors, right? And Supercell was our seed investor. So when we went through all of this, we not only had an incredibly supportive team, but we also had an incredibly supportive investor who didn't put unnecessary pressure on us.
Gotcha. No, that's good. So we'll dig back into Supercell as an investor and your culture in a moment. But I guess to even just kind of help segue us there a little bit more in the context of Love and Pies. Obviously, you did end up successfully transitioning the game into something that has now become extremely successful and now has like very strong engagement metrics. And obviously at this point also you've now scaled up live ops. You've also done a good job of infusing elements like narrative, like gradual progression on the board and pleasing aesthetics and interior design choices, lots of things that appeal to different types of gamers. And Love and Pies, I think as you were alluding to earlier, also does a standout job of supporting inclusivity in its characters in a way that many other games teams seem to struggle with or just not even prioritize. And before we move on to culture and investors, I'd just love to have you explain how your team thinks about inclusive game design.
We're actually pretty structured and maybe even a bit clinical about our approach to designing diversely. And I do want to highlight that obviously all comes from our writing and design team and art team. And so, I mean, I can take absolutely no credit for this really, but they've put so much effort and work into making sure, for example, that we're super accountable. For example, our writer spent a lot of time putting together a database on actually merging like US and UK demographics. And then she basically scaled it down to sort of like the number of characters that we have in a game, and then focused on, like adjusted it to overrepresent ages, sexualities, ethnicities, which are normally underrepresented in games. So clearly, like a lot of thought and structure went into that in the first place. And I think another one that's generally very important to us as a company, or two things that are really important for us as companies, is curiosity. And that means sort of like spending time with content created by creators that don't necessarily look like us, right? And really making sure that we're engaging with stories that are not only our own, and that we talk to people who do represent sort of like the characters in our game and our audience. And the second one is really about respect, and that means that none of our characters ever don't show respect to other characters. Even the baddies in the game still have certain limits what they would do from a narrative perspective.
Right.
And I guess a fundamental part of Love and Pies game design is to create a safe and nourishing space for players. So we make sure we avoid trigger words or situations that sort of like destroy the safe and nourishing space. But I think most importantly for, being able to design for a diverse audience, and making a game and creating a company that's inclusive is really to have everyone on board and have a team that shares the same values, and have really, like ensure that those things are just core pillars of the company, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's great what you're accomplishing and leading on here. And I think it's also a testament, again, to what you're just saying, that it works really well because you had the intent in mind from the very beginning. I mean, I think we would both agree that we would like to see more thoughtfulness around inclusivity and, this kind of structured thinking in more places in the industry. But, maybe from certain perspectives over there, it might be harder to do because they don't have that day one culture set. So I'm curious, Caro, if you had to give some advice to, game leads or studio leads at other big companies that might align with this vision but are kind of struggling to figure out how to get there, what would you say?
I would say that, that kind of feeds into the culture topic, right? And culture is always what you do and not what you say. And so I think it's so important that we have really good role models. And so I generally feel that obviously we as a games industry who, is actually so powerful and can have so much, such impact on our audience, but also on our employees. It's almost our duty to focus on, having a positive impact and even help to change societal change, to help societal change effectively. So yeah, I think that's my main recommendation. Make sure you basically lead from the top.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So I did have a question about culture here, but in some ways we've already been answering it because it's been a foundation of so many of these other things that we've been talking about. But I'd still like to give you a chance. Is there anything else unique about your culture that you want to highlight or call out that you're proud of?
I think it was always important for us that we would show that high performance and high care are not mutually exclusive, because sometimes companies or the gaming industry makes it look like they're mutually exclusive. There are a lot of companies that are incredibly high performance, but maybe don't really care as much for their employees. And then there are other companies that maybe focus more on high care, but potentially neglect sort of the fact that in order to have a really positive impact on many people, you actually have to be successful. So I think I'm very proud of the fact that we've kind of shown the industry that both is possible.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. There's a balance to strike there, but it's definitely doable. I'd like to maybe zoom back a little bit. I know you were also a founding member of King's London Studio. I'd love to hear about what lessons in studio building you learned there that were great that you then were able to apply to getting Trailmix off the ground. What were some of the good things that you learned?
There's so many good things. There's so many good things that we learned at King, and the opportunity to be able to set a studio up from scratch, even before Candy Crush was launched on mobile, and being able to launch a game called Farm Hero Saga that became very successful for King was really incredible. And I think what King did really, really well in the early days was to focus on the actually a very inclusive culture. King is obviously a Swedish company, and when we first set up the London studio, we had the opportunity to actually get 2 Swedish developers as loaners, so to say, as part of our core team, and that really helped us to sort of make sure that our studio would also reflect the overall sort of like more Swedish King culture, and build, basically help build a really, really good culture for the team.
Sweet. And I kind of want to ask you about like stuff that you didn't want to take, but before then, this is a total tangent. But when I was looking at the Meet the Team page on your website, Caro, I know you also have a favorite word that I saw in your bio on the website. I don't know how important this word really is to you, but it sort of intersects with some of the things that we've been talking about how to build inclusivity in your cultures and your games and your office. So I just wanted to ask, what is your favorite word and why? Total tangent.
Okay, well, so it's a German word, and you pronounce it Gemütlichkeit. And it's kind of like, it's similar to Hygge, I think, which is more well known internationally. And it's basically coziness, right? But sort of it just feels it just gives you the feeling of like a very safe space that makes you feel very comfortable, that gives you psychological safety. It probably involves woolen socks and hot chocolate. But definitely like this word and I guess the the English translation really the cozy has been an inspiration for us in many ways. We actually, when we talk about Love and Pies, we say that Love and Pies is a cozy telenovela, and that basically means that it makes you feel really, really good, but it's also exciting, and sort of like the twists and turns of a telenovela are just crazy and exciting, and like want you to explore more. But we wanted to make sure that it's still sort of like in the cozy realm. And actually, if you were to visit us in our Trailmix London office, then you would notice that it actually feels like your favorite coffee shop when you walk into the office.
Awesome. Yeah. So let it be known that I do my research and don't let any stone go unturned. I just had to know more about your favorite word, even though it was a total tangent, and it got me lost in an abyss of thinking about what my favorite word would be, and I still have not figured out an answer. But now I'm inspired. But anyways, back to talking about what you learned from King. You did a great job describing, a few of the good things that you took from King. But I'm curious, was there anything else, maybe not necessarily bad about King, but things that you just wanted to do in a different way or rethink it, sort of from the grounds up? Would love to hear your take on that too.
I think our main learning was that we just grew the King London office too quickly. Think we obviously sort of were riding on the wave of success, and I think to some extent we felt that a measure of success is how quickly you can grow the studio. And what I was talking about earlier in terms of like, setting the culture correctly at the beginning and sort of like getting a lot of support from King in Stockholm to do that properly, think we, by growing so quickly, that it really did have a negative impact on the culture long term. And that means for Trailmix, one of our biggest learnings really has always been that it's really not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And you should never hire for vanity's sake, in a way. And it is interesting when you when you start a company and you start raising money, and people often comment on how sort of like slowly you grow from a headcount perspective, and that this other companies already has like 200 employees, and we always smirked a little bit about this because we made the experience that this is just not really a good thing, right? Especially if you want to build something that lasts for a very, very long time, you have to be incredibly rigid when it comes to hiring, and you have to be incredibly focused on onboarding the people that you hired well into the team, and give them the space, give them the space to absorb the culture, and also make sure that you don't remove accountability and responsibility from people just by, adding more and more people to the team. It's often absolutely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said. Before moving on, I was going to ask, now that you're 5 years into Trailmix, are there just any other entrepreneurial lessons learned that you didn't expect that are worth sharing? Any words of advice for other of us first time founders trying to figure everything out?
Oh my God, so much. It's been such an incredible learning experience. I would say that my entrepreneurial journey has been incredibly character building, in the sense that I feel it taught me to be more humble, really, and also more thoughtful. It taught me that it's always a good idea to just ask people for help, and also the fact that you just are not going to have the answers for everything, and you don't have to, right? Because in the end, you should build a team that that is actually, like you should hire people that are better than you at what they're doing. And I think those are my main lessons.
Love it. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move on to some final topics. So one, based on how Trailmix talks about itself on your site, it's clear that you're now thinking bigger than Love and Pies. And I won't dig into exactly what's next unless you want to, but more generally, how are you and Trailmix thinking about scaling from here? Like, what in the future are you now really excited about?
Well, we are excited about the situation that we are in at the moment, which is basically we have a really strong team, we have a great foundation, we have a beautiful game that our players love, that has amazing metrics. Since May, we are a majority-owned Supercell investee company, which basically means that we're still operating fully independently, but we do have a really strong partner whose resources we can leverage, and who also gives us the opportunity to really work on the big sort of like the big bets, if that makes sense. And coming back to our core pillars and why we founded Trailmix, we do want to build those safe and nourishing spaces for millions of players. And we do want to have a real impact on our players, our employees, the industry, and hopefully society at large. And so I'm really excited about like taking the mandate of using games for good and sort of pushing it to the next level. I think that the way I think about this is that in the end, in order to be able to really have a positive impact, you first of all actually have to be successful. And so I think as a company generally, that is obviously our biggest focus, to make sure that we do make games that have the potential to be top grossing games, but then use our success to really have a positive impact.
Gotcha. Are there any other things that you're thinking about related to scaling in terms of either like what you want to make sure stays the same in your culture that maybe is hard as you grow your headcount so much, or pitfalls you want to avoid that, other things you've seen in other studios that you've worked at or watched? How are you thinking about scale from like the culture ops perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely most thoughtful about like how we scale sustainably, how we ensure that we keep hiring the right people, how we make sure that from a cultural fit, we bring people on board to enrich the culture, and I guess really believe in our mission as a company. And one of we have a few initiatives sort of that we're starting to implement to make sure of that. And one of which is actually we brought on board a people and well-being manager who really focuses on sort of the employee journey, if that makes sense. So from hiring, onboarding, even to the point when decide to leave Trailmix at some point as part of like an alumni group, and making sure that we keep supporting our former employees way beyond their Trailmix experience.
Gotcha. No, that's all really interesting. I want to hit on the Supercell topic a little bit more. You mentioned Trailmix is now Supercell majority owned. It seems like you have pretty strong autonomy, but you have additional resources that are potentially available. Could you talk a little bit more? I think a lot of people are curious about this. What is it really like to have Supercell as an investor? Like, what are the things that people who aren't in that position might not be aware of how that works or what the benefits are?
I think it has changed quite a bit over the years. When they first invested as a seed investor, I think we were the second minority invested company.
Oh, wow.
And and it also meant that they were super, super hands off, and we checked in every now and then, but really they just got completely out of our hair, and we just did whatever we wanted to do, which we obviously very much appreciated as a new company. At the same time, though, I suppose as we, got to know each other better, and as sort of, I think Supercell also, started investing more into sort of the investee group. We've definitely started seeing a lot of synergies, and have been getting more and more support from Supercell, especially now as a majority-owned company. And we definitely feel that the investee company strategy is a very, very important part of the overall Supercell strategy, and they make available a lot of resources which we would just not have access to. So I think they do a really amazing job in sort of like finding a balance between being incredibly hands-off and just letting the teams pretty much get on with things, but now also have a support system that really allows us to be incredibly successful, having them, on board as our investor, and definitely making it more than just a financial partnership.
Right. What does that look like? What does that support system mean besides money?
Pretty much anything we need. I mean, it's very much a pull system in the sense that if we find ourselves in a situation where we need some data support, we ask if someone can help us for a while, or at least give us some high level input. Or for example, when it comes to, I guess, especially as smaller companies, as you don't have a lot of the sort of more corporate functions, I suppose, there's a lot of support in, for example, getting some advice from PR, how to do this well, or getting some advice from their recruitment team, and getting some advice from their marketing team. I mean, they have such excellent teams in so many different areas that you just actually can't really build yourself that easily as a small company. And so those are really the areas that we're trying to leverage.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really enlightening. I think people will find that insight interesting. So a couple last final questions before we wrap up. And the last main one, I'm just to extend this conversation out a bit wider. Caro, I'm just curious, what else are you excited about in the world of mobile free to play? Like any trends or mechanics or games that outside of your own that you're really excited to watch unfold?
Yes, definitely. One is that there are more and more female CEOs founding games companies. Definitely 5 years ago when we founded Trailmix, it was a bit of an odd thing to be a female CEO and co-founder, and it's just not anymore. And there's so many smart women out there building companies, and I really love seeing that, and I really hope that continues. But secondly, I also love to see that more companies are comfortable telling stories that are not usually being told in mobile free-to-play games. I do see more just narrative in games generally, but also more diverse characters in games. So I think a little part of me hopes that that we also help to inspire others, and that we generally can be a bit of like a role model for the industry, and show that making games that represent the audience is also good. Focusing on diversity is also good for business, and it's worth investing in that.
Great. And I guess the very final question is, if our listeners or viewers want to follow along with Trailmix or continue learning from you, where can they either follow you, follow Trailmix to stay in touch?
Probably best to connect with me on LinkedIn. I should really be better at Twitter, but I've just never really figured it out, to be honest.
Yeah, Twitter's hard. Yep.
So definitely LinkedIn would be the best place.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Caro, this has been really fun. Again, really enjoyed previously studying up about Love and Pies and your story, and it was really awesome to have this conversation with you today to meet the kind of one of the many faces behind the game and the company, and to learn even more. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give us a like, subscribe, 5 stars. It would mean a lot. We'll put the links to all things Caro and Trailmix in the episode description below. And of course, if you want to check out Naavik's resources as well, we'll put some links to that in the description too. So thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.